Support for WUWM podcast comes from Hop Harvest and Vine and Good Harvest Market in Pewaukee, part of One Destination, combining farm-to-table dining, local craft beers, and organic groceries under one roof. More at goodharvestmarket.com.
From 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR, this is Lake Effect. I'm Audrey Nowakowski. Today, we'll look at the multi-million-dollar lead remediation project that the Milwaukee public school system underwent last year. Then, we'll explore how to stay active and social during the cold winter months.
This realization of I could move somewhere warmer, or I have to realize this is going to be half of our year, every year. We cannot just throw out half of our year.
Plus, we'll explore some of Wisconsin's weirdest museums.
It's a very odd place. I mean, all these places are great because they're so unique. And like you say, Wisconsin is very rich with them, so I had no trouble finding stuff to write about.
All that's coming up on Lake Effect. This is Lake Effect from 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR. I'm Audrey Nowakowski. Thanks for joining us today. 2025 was a whirlwind for Milwaukee Public Schools. It hired a new superintendent and dealt with flooding right before the start of the school year. But the biggest story was the school district's multi-million-dollar cleanup of toxic lead paint in its classrooms and common spaces. The project began after a student tested positive for elevated lead levels, and the contamination was traced back to the student's school. That was 1 year ago in January. WUWM education reporter Catherine Kokel is joined by Michael Terza. He's the interim chief operating officer at MPS, and he's been at the helm of the lead remediation project.
Over the last year, MPS has taken on this Herculean task of remediating potentially toxic lead paint in its schools. We are now at a point where it seems like all of the places where students could have been interacting with this have been remediated. Can you kind of explain what it took to get here and how many campuses were affected by this project?
Basically, we decided that any school that was built before 1978, which was when lead paint was officially eliminated, and that they had the potential to have lead in them, in the painting. And so that was about 101 schools. Out of our 158 schools roughly that we have, 2/3 of our schools would be affected by that. And then we began to develop a plan to address that. And one of the first steps that we did do was we asked the schools to go through a process called decluttering. And what that was to go through their classrooms, their offices, and eliminate all of the stuff that they no longer needed. In that process, we probably took out of schools over half a million pounds of stuff and about 30,000 pounds of equipment. In the interim of that, we decided that we couldn't be doing this on our own. And so we went out for a request for proposal and selected a company called JCP Construction to be kind of the general manager of that. And they were the ones who hired the necessary painters, the movers, the cleaners, and all of those other people with the intent to begin work on June 15th, which was basically the last day of school for us. Once all the schools were closed for the summer, that's when the effort began. One of the things that really surprised us more than anything was how much work we had to do in these schools. Even though we knew that there was lead-based paint in them, in some schools, we had to almost take every surface, every square inch of surface and remediate it. There was a couple schools where we anticipated it taking us maybe a month to 6 weeks, where it took us the full 10 weeks over the summer because they were just that much work that needed to be done. So with that in mind, we basically finished all of the schools with regard to the painting of them probably by around the middle of August. And then we began the process of cleaning the schools and getting them ready to have the analytic wipes, which was required by the Milwaukee Health Department in order for them to clear the school for occupancy. They had to beat a standard that was less than 10 parts per billion. That was almost a very, very difficult thing to do. I mean, you take any house, probably the one you're living in, and you do an analytic wipe, and you probably would not pass that analytic wipe. We had to clean them to such a degree. Got that done, and basically had by the first week of school was able to say that all of our first 50 schools were remediated and passed the necessary clearances by the health department. Then the next set of schools, the next 50 schools that we had to do were those that were basically after 1950, from 1950 to 1978. Those were schools, lead-based paint had kind of been falling out of favor, so it wasn't used that extensively. But there was still lead-based paint in some of the schools. And so we had to remediate those, and we did those primarily after work hours and on weekends, and was able to clean those all up and get those all passing the necessary inspections by the end of November. The last school that we were doing was Congress Elementary, and that was done just the week before Thanksgiving holidays. And so at that point in time, we were clear where we were able to say that any rooms or any areas where students were occupied or where they went through or passed through were taken care of.
Thank you for sharing that, because this went on for so long. And at the same time, all of this work was condensed into a year. And so it's a good kind of recap of what this year really brought for MPS. I want to make sure people know what we're talking about when we talk about lead paint. The concern about lead paint is that it can get disturbed. You know, kids kind of roughhouse around school. They can bang chairs into walls that can cause chipping of paint. And then the big concern at MPS, from my understanding, was this dust. You know, like this paint would be disturbed and it would kind of create this fine lead dust. And that was very often how kids were coming in contact with it. If they were, is that the lead paint would chip off and create this fine dust that covered everything. So when you're talking about removing 500,000 pounds of things from schools, that stuff could have just come in contact with this lead dust. What about the air circulation in these schools now?
Well, as part of the overall cleaning process, in order for us to pass clearances, we had to make sure that the dust, the HVAC systems were not lead contaminant. And one thing about lead dust is it's heavier, and so it always falls to the ground. And so it's not like it stays in the air circulating constantly. It will always fall to the ground. And so we had to make sure that areas that are horizontal, like sills and floors and things like that, were always and continually are kept clean. And one of the things that we are doing is we've enhanced our cleaning procedures to make sure that we clean areas, particularly those kinds of surfaces, the horizontal surfaces, more thoroughly. We've added HEPA to all of our schools so that they can make sure that if they do see a chip on the floor, it's taken care of correctly and it's taken care of immediately rather than having being swept around and maybe not picked up properly. So I think the short answer to your question is that the air quality of the schools is not going to be affected by lead dust in any major way.
Thank you for explaining that. I'm going to take a minute to reintroduce you. Today we're hearing from Michael Terza. He's the Interim Chief Operations Officer and Interim Director of Facilities and Maintenance for Milwaukee Public Schools. So the school district did acknowledge that this project was necessary because of years and years and years of deferred maintenance. Why did MPS choose this moment to take on this multi-million-dollar project? Why now?
Well, to answer your question initially is that, there was a lot of deferred maintenance since 2010. Department of Facilities Maintenance lost almost 100 positions. And so that that had an impact on our ability to address the issues that we had. So a student was diagnosed with high levels of lead, and the Milwaukee Health Department, which when they are notified of this, went to what they looked at sources, and usually it's either the sources, the home or the school. And in the case of this child, they found out that the source of the lead was the school. And then after that, it became that other schools had issues where they had a potential lead situation where, again, the Milwaukee Health Department came in and looked at the schools and found that they were in need of repair. And so they began to require us to remediate these schools. It was beginning to get out of getting to be a much more major task than initially thought. And so working with the health department, MPS decided, we came up with the lead action plan, which was going to guide our efforts around this. And so it kind of became a effort with the Milwaukee Health Department to do it and to do it at this particular time.
The books are not closed on this yet. Although a majority of the work is done, there is still work that is continuing, as you mentioned. How much money has MPS spent to date on this project?
To date, we probably spent upwards of $43 million and plus. Like I said, you said we're still doing work, so I would envision maybe we'll go as high as $45 million.
And can you give kind of a brief explanation of where that money came from for people who may not be familiar with the budgeting process at the district?
We have a construction fund in which we use that fund to do the lead remediation. It's not part of our general operating fund. It's a separate fund that is used for construction, deferred maintenance, things like that. And that was the fund that we tapped to do the lead remediation.
Was there enough money in that fund to do this nearly $50 million project?
Yeah, there was about close to $100 million in that fund. And so we've used almost 45% of it.
Okay. Although this was a grueling project, there were moments where the community really came together. I'm thinking about in the couple of weeks before the start of the school year, there were a lot of volunteers that helped teachers put their classrooms back together. All of their items had been disturbed over the summer for cleaning. When you look back on this last year, which you came out of retirement to lead for the district, are there any bright spots that you think are good for people to know about?
Sure. The first one I would say is even in our very first item of decluttering, we had a lot of teachers and staff who really took that particular task to heart and really did a good job. The other thing was just the workers. I mean, they had to work, you got to remember, through some really hard conditions. In the beginning of July, temperatures was 90 and plus. And we had to, in order to do the work, close all the windows, shut off all the HVAC systems because we didn't want to spread dust all over the place, enclose these rooms in protective covering so we didn't spread dust, and have these guys in TAVEC suits going through that where the temperature in the room was probably 115 degrees. And they did it. And that was really tough. And then they kept going. And doing that. And then the other things would be my custodial staff, who not only did their normal summer cleaning, but came to these other schools and helped clean these rooms, get them ready for the testing and everything else like that. Did that on weekends, did that overtime, everything else like that. That was really tremendous on their part. And then finally, like you said, we had a whole bunch of volunteers from the city, from private firms who came into our schools and help teachers set up, because again, we were just so far down to the wire. I just knew that we were going to leave some schools probably not the way they would have liked to have had them, just because of the amount of work, but that with the extra help, we're able to get the rooms in pretty good shape for the first day of school. Now, I think a lot of teachers would say it wasn't quite there, but we got it to the point where the classroom was good. They could begin their teaching and things were good. So yes, there was a lot of things that helped.
What a year for MPS. Thank you so much for coming on to share a little bit about what this project has been like and where we go next.
You're welcome.
Michael Terza is the Interim Chief Operations Officer and Interim Director of Facilities and Maintenance for Milwaukee Public Schools. He spoke with WUWM education reporter Catherine Kokel. The district is continuing lead screenings for children into this new year. You can find more information at wuwm.com. Need some flexibility for when you listen to Lake Effect? You can listen to us on demand. Find it as a podcast wherever you like to listen, to download, and enjoy on the go. In about 10 minutes, we'll hear how some Milwaukeeans make the most of winter. But first, we'll share some tips on how to keep your car in good shape in the cold. Keep listening to Lake Effect on WUWM. You're listening to Lake Effect on Milwaukee's NPR. I'm Audrey Nowakowski. Before going outside in the winter, we typically take extra precautions to face the cold. But should we be doing the same for our cars? The cold, combined with snow and salt, can not only make it challenging to drive, but also a challenge to keep our cars in good shape. To share some tips on winter car care to help keep our vehicles running smoothly, I'm joined by our auto contributor. Mark Savage, welcome back to Lake Effect. Great to have you in the studio.
Yeah, it's nice to be back in the studio.
It's been a while. So it is winter, and while Wisconsin, of course, likes to keep us on our toes with how many degrees fluctuates, we're here to talk about how to best take care of our cars and to not put extra stress on them in the colder season. So we'll start with some super basic things first. Do we need snow tires?
I would say in our climate, probably not. If we were up in the UP, maybe that would be a good thing to have. I mean, we have not had tons of snow in recent years. I mean, if we get a 2 or 3 inch snowfall, what's that last a day or two, or the streets are clear within 2 or 3 hours? Snow tires not that important, but I would say this. If you are maybe a younger driver that has not driven a lot in snow, or you know your own skill level and think, I'm not a great driver, it's not a bad thing to have. You're going to want to put them on, I would say here, probably in December and take them off by March or so just because the temperature gets warmer. Snow tires are great for giving you some extra traction and better steering ability and better stopping ability. And I would say generally we don't need them unless you're going to go up further north and be there most of the winter.
Yeah, good to know. So speaking of tires, the change in temperature also changes the PSI, especially if you're someone like me who likes to have my PSI read right up on my screen at all times just to keep track of it. You notice there's a slight fluctuation, anywhere from 3 to 5 PSI, depending on what the weather is doing. So can you explain why we see this difference and when is the right time to either let some of that pressure out or add more?
Yeah, I think everybody has had that light flash on their dash that says tire. And that's probably after 1 or 2 pounds of pressure change in any tire on your car. And the reason for that, of course, is the cold weather. Things contract, right? Well, air is contracting too, and that relieves some of the pressure, so you have lower pressure in your tire. So it's a simple, scientific thing. If it's 1 or 2 pounds, it's not probably that big a deal. But what you want to do is, of course, check it with your tire gauge to make sure that even though it says it's down 1, maybe it's down 5. And then it becomes a problem because the softer your tire becomes, then it has different traction than if it's better than overfilling. But nonetheless, it's important to know. It's mainly check it whenever you see that light come on. And obviously, if it's a 24 below zero day and you look at the tire and it looks pretty good, you think, well, okay, I'm going to wait till tomorrow when it's 20 degrees.
Right, it might change.
And then I'll check it and then top it off a little bit, fill it up. I would say if it goes up to 45, 50 degrees, you might want to let a little pressure out again. But most tires, you between 30 and 35 pounds, you're good. And most of them are around 32. So you know, you can just keep up with it. And, you know, it's not practical for us to check that every single day.
Exactly.
Unless maybe you got a heated garage.
Yes. Well, and speaking of heated garages, or if someone doesn't have the luxury of parking in a garage, maybe they have a slab or anything else, should we warm up our car before driving?
Well, I think the old wives' tale was like warm your car up for 15, 20 minutes and let it sit there. Everything that I've read over the last several years is because we have fuel injection and because we have computers controlling all of our cars now, once you start the engine, about 30 seconds, it has totally got all the oil where it needs to go. All the fluids are moving. So it's basically you get in, you put on your seatbelt, turn up the heat, whatever you want to do to adjust before you pull out of the driveway. That's fine.
Well, and ideally, our commutes are pretty reasonable, and hopefully a lot of people are near things should they need help. But in general, what are some good supplies or tools to always have in our car in the winter?
And this is my advice, but it's not necessarily what I do. So, well, we should.
Well, you're in different cars testing them out all the time.
I am in different cars testing them out, so I don't take a little kit with me everywhere. But I would say an important thing here is to make sure you have some gloves because you never know when you're going to need some gloves. I think a flashlight, something that you can look and see and identify what a problem is. Have something like a tire gauge so you know you can check your tire if it's looking a little low to you. Make sure you have a jack in the car because some cars don't have everything in them anymore, especially if you buy a used car. It might not be in there. A lot of the new cars don't have a spare tire. You know, what they say is things like have a ratchet set, pliers, things like that. One of the smartest things I've heard recently is have some zip ties in your car because you never know when something's going to come loose, that if you have a zip tie and you can get it tightened back up, even if it's a loose cable, something under the car, even a tailpipe for that matter, something so it's not dragging, at least get you to the next gas station or mechanic shop, something like that. So those are all good things to have. I don't know. I think probably having your cell phone with you is the most important thing to have at this point.
Yeah. Well, and you will know more about this. So I don't know if it's as necessary with newer cars that have better gauges, better balance, but do we need to have cat litter or sandbags in our cars in the back to help us drive in winter or to have on hand if we slide off the road and need some traction?
I mean, there's nothing wrong with having that. I probably wouldn't bother with that unless I would. If you're in a rural area and you think maybe I'm going to slide off a road someplace and there's not anybody around for the next 20 minutes or something, yeah, it might not be a bad thing to have. But then again, we also realize that probably, we're maybe up to over half of the cars and trucks that we have now have four-wheel drive, and that at least gives you the ability to more likely get out of a snowdrift or something like that, as long as you haven't dropped off into some really big hole somewhere.
Right. And speaking of four-wheel, it's not a hall pass, right? It's not a solution. We still need to drive carefully, even if you have four-wheel.
Yeah. And here's the way I think of it is that on four-wheel drive, it gives you more traction, and it's better in snow or something where you have something to get traction on. But if you're driving down the highway and you hit black ice, four-wheel drive really doesn't – it might help you for one instant of a second on something, but most of the time you're skating across the top of that. Mm-hmm. So be careful. Use your brain along with and your foot to drive a little more responsibly.
Now moving on to like the overall maintenance aspect of car care, maybe something we check before the winter. How often should we be replacing our battery or at least checking on it before wintertime? Is there more of a chance of the battery not working in the frigid weather, or is it just a matter of the age of the battery? I
think the age of the battery more. Cold does have an effect on the battery. And ironic that you should mention this because I just had the battery replaced in our car. It was a 3-year battery. It was almost up to 3 years, but it was starting to lose its power to crank. So we replaced it. That's good. But know how old your battery is and look under the hood every once in a while. You can always, clean the corrosion off around the posts if you want to. That will help it some. But mostly know how old your battery is and realize that it's really more prone to fail in the warm weather. Because once it gets really hot out, and especially under the hood of a car, and it gets trapped under there, and the heat gets trapped under there, that's much more likely to cause a problem with your battery, more of a sudden death. It's more the cranking power in the in the winter when it gets cold. And obviously, if it doesn't crank enough, you're not going to fire up the car.
With winter comes lots of salt,
Oh,
of
yeah.
course. How often should we be making sure that our cars are clean? Or, is the underbelly wash really a thing we need, even though I think it's something that the car wash stations are trying to have us do.
Well, it certainly seems like that, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But my sponsor of the car, the Jiffy Wash, says no. Everything that I've read, it says maybe every 10 days if there's a lot of snow and ice and salt. And it is important to do those underbody flushes because that's the part of your car that's going to suffer with the ice and the salt, because that affects your chassis, your suspension, your exhaust system. That's what it's going to eat into because those are the metal parts. Think about how much aluminum and then composite materials are in the bodies of the cars. Now, you don't see, except for older cars, a lot of rust on cars. So it may look horrible on your car, and it might, work on the paint job a little bit over time if you leave it on there like for the whole winter. But if you're going to wash the car every 10 days, 2 weeks, something like that, that helps the body easily. But get the underbody flush, pay the extra $3.50 or $10 or whatever it is these days, and help preserve the underside of your car because that's the functional part of the car.
All right. So, yeah, I will take the time to do at least one underbody flush this winter.
There you go.
You've inspired me to do it. So, Mark, thank you so much for coming in and sharing some tips.
No problem. Thanks.
Mark Savage writes the auto review column Savage on Wheels for WUWM and savageonwheels.com. When it's this cold outside, we might find ourselves hibernating, just staying inside where it's warm and cozy. But unfortunately, we can't just hide inside all winter long. Now we hear from Milwaukeeans about the benefits of getting outside and how they do it in a series that we call Group Chat, where we hand the microphone over to community members. Here's Aaron Whitney, Mia Noel, and Jakai Ali.
I think the main thing that surprises people that I do in the winter is run in the cold. With a group of black men, specifically black men, surprises people because, our community isn't so active in that way on a consistent basis.
I think I've tried almost everything. The consistent things I do are probably swimming, which is not outside, but I enjoy doing it in winter because I like to be hydrated. I like the little sauna hot tub time afterwards at the gym. I feel like my whole body feels warm. I think other stuff, I've tried swimming outside in the winter. I've done the polar plunge. I've done all kinds of different things. They're not maybe for me consistently, but I gave them a shot,
You did it.
People do this, so let me try it out.
My ways of getting outside are the warm winter walks. They're not warm at all, but I kind of try to frame that in my brain of how lucky are we? And we'll get to that later, but maybe I'll try cross-country skiing every once in a while. That feels very I'm doing something today. Am I great at it? No. And that's not what we're there for. But we do a little bit of that. I try to get people to have parties outside with me. They're not parties. We're going for a walk. But if you frame it as a party, it's maybe a little misleading once they get there. No, we're just walking a beer line. But those might be surprising surprises.
Tell us about those parties.
I think I was going to say, I think we could, co-plan a party right here. This running thing. Well, I'll say the little parties, there's really nothing. It's just come with me. We're going to do this, activity outside. I think we all get really stuck inside or we wait for plans to kind of happen. And we don't really centralize outside as the place to be for, many reasons of accessibility or just, it's cold. And frankly, for myself personally, it's actually not easy either. People might look to folks who work outside. I'm pointing to Mia, or who engage with gang community members outside. For me, it's not the simple go. But so these little parties are hey, folks, we're all going for a big old walk at 4:00 today. And that's it. And just like group chat pressure a little
But
bit.
the messaging, it sounds, real intentional. You said warm winter walks. That sounds like
We're really working on the framing there as well of like, I get to go for a nice little walk because those first 5 minutes, you got to push through. For me personally, it's not warm. Maybe we're not selling this whole outside time for the first 5 minutes, but I swear, if you stick through it with a nice cozy coffee, like you just got to keep your head down until you get that like warmth going in your layers, and then eventually it gets nice. Have faith, maybe have faith those first 5. So can I ask, like, say your group one morning they're like, Jakai, this is the limit, mid-February, blustering winds.
Right.
Would you have the same like, we got to keep going? Like, would you still go out, or is it you're doing it because you're with this group?
I like that question. First and foremost, I do it for myself. We go out once a week on Saturdays, either Saturday around noon or 6:30 when it's, at this time of year, pitch black. And it's simple, but it's not easy. I got that from Will Smith, and we can dive into that.
It's like running in the dark.
We have headlamps, but that one is easier because you've had all day to mentally prepare. On a more consistent basis is wake up as early as sometimes 5 o'clock when I can, pull myself up to do that. And these past, just Monday and Tuesday, yesterday and the day before, 9 degrees at 5 o'clock in the morning.
You got a lot of head nods going on in this room here.
Yeah.
Wild stuff. I love it.
And it's more about doing it for myself. It's like if I do it, I'm rewarded by all the benefits. And if I don't do it, I'm affected by all of the ailments, so to say. It's like now I don't have the same energy. I don't have the same boost and blood flow and endorphins and whatnot, all the cool language. But it's just two sides to that coin.
So Mia, I'm introducing you. Mia works with getting folks outside all the time in the parks. But also I heard you like organized walks with friends. Like we're doing this big old walkaroo.
Yeah, I mean, I've only been working for the park for like 2.5 years. So well before that, I was big on getting people outside in the winter. And it's like very selfish. It's that having other people to be outside in the winter helps me get outside, breathe fresh air, socialize, not just making soup, which is a delightful winter activity.
It is.
But I've been organizing walks with friends. I've done Winter Olympics, which are just like a full day of outside winter activities just for fun with friends. Like we're going to have a hot drinks competition and a snow sculpture competition and a freestyle sledding competition just for fun. A couple of years ago, I really started pushing an idea of like BWE with my people as well, which is that every winter has the potential to be the best winter ever. And if you go into the winter feeling like this winter could be the best winter ever, instead of being like,
Right.
winter's around the corner, this is the time where everything is bad. If you like change the mentality a little bit, it helps me a lot.
How big of a role does seasonal depression or, that aspect play in, what y'all are doing and what y'all aspire to do?
One of the big pushes of it's time to like start planning those walks is I'm at the point where we're like anticipating that like winter's coming. So I like that Mia has this attitude of, yay, it's coming. And sometimes you just gotta like you just gotta like fake it till you make it sometimes. For me, it was this realization of like, I could move somewhere warmer, or I have to realize like this is gonna be half of our year. Every year. We cannot just throw out half of our year. I think sometimes I fall into like the little participant category where I'm like, so what are we all doing? Who's going to like put it on the calendar? But I think being the friend, like today is soup day. That's it. There's no explanation. Just get here. Maybe I have soup for you. Maybe I don't. But we'll figure it out with those lures. But yeah, because those winter blues are so real. And, getting outside for walks does not fix it all. But it kind of supports this like more stable, possibly stabilizing like Every morning on the weekday, I go for a walk that's this long. I get to the blue bench and then I turn around. It's like a little vitamin. It's just like a support for other stuff and mental health that you can work on. What about y'all?
It plays a huge role in like evolution of my mentality towards winter. Like I moved back to Wisconsin after college, and it was like the most depressed I'd ever been for like 6 months, and I graduated in December, so it was winter time. Similarly, like I live in Wisconsin, unless I'm moving somewhere else, I have to figure out how to like be active and connected in winter, even though this is a time where a lot of people like move indoors. And so to do that, I started trying out like a lot of winter activities. I didn't grow up doing those. I didn't grow up snowshoeing or cross country skiing or any of those things. But I was like, it's a winter activity. That's what people do. I should try and do those things. I really love sledding. When my husband and I first started dating, I would be like, let's go for a quick sled after work. So like
quick sled.
a quick sled. Because
just a
when
quick
you're
one.
an adult and you don't have a lot of endurance, sledding is hard. You know, like walk up and down a hill, and after like 30 minutes, you're like, that's good. But those 30 minutes are so fun. So we would get on our like snow gear and we would go sled for like 30 minutes. And then he'd go to his house and I'd go to my house. And we'd be like, that was really cool. That was fun. Just a quick sled. Just a quick sled after work. Not a big commitment. Not we're out here for 4 hours. Just a quick sled.
The start of a great relationship, folks, is just some quick sleds.
Just, yeah.
Taking notes.
And it's interesting that you say just 30 minutes because, that short amount of time can do so much for your day. And I'll answer that question for myself. Seasonal depression, especially for these runs, has been a key inspiration. Living in Milwaukee my whole life, I've hated the winter. I grew up taking a bus, and I still take the bus, on a consistent basis. Being outside has become a chore. It's frustrating to look forward to, but you said something, key, Aaron. You said, this is half of the year. Am I going to waste half of the year, I guess, succumbing to the elements? And knowing that just like I said, it's two sides of that coin. Either I do it and I'm rewarded, or I don't do it and I have to have whatever that looks like. That's been one of the prime inspirations for myself.
What advice would you give other folks who are trying to get outside a little more in winter?
I'm always here for like start small and like celebrate that and give yourself some nice like preparations. Like it is not pleasant going outside in a sweatshirt and sweatpants. That's not what I look like here today. We are wearing the tucked in shirt under the sweatshirt with the pant. Like I don't need to give y'all a fit check, but give yourself layers, like bundle up. And I know that feels like a lot of work, but that little preparation is going to make that post 5-minute walk real nice and cozy. Or pairing it, a sommelier of walks, like pair a walk with like your, we're starting here. You're pairing your walk with like a coffee shop, or like sometimes that's those walk parties of like, we're going to go walk to get coffee, or I'll intentionally like pick a spot where we can like go wave to the river and then turn around. Those are really nice. But I think the biggest thing is doing it with others, like finding kind of like a pal. And then just like doing as much as you can and letting them know that too. Like we are not here to like climb a mountain.
For one, small wins. You got to celebrate those. I quoted Will Smith earlier and I said, it's simple, but it's not easy. On paper, walking or running, 1 mile, you've done that a billion times. It's very simple, but when you add, certain factors, it might seem difficult. And it might be difficult, quite frankly. But, just doing it. The hardest part is starting. Sometimes you got to muster up every ounce of emotional intelligence you got so that you can overcome whatever barrier that you might be facing internally and realize that, it's so much better on the other side.
I'd say if I had advice to give, it's like, one, if you're just going solo and that's okay, try and notice how you feel after something. Try and notice like the things on walks or what's happening outdoors. See like what birds you can see, or look at like buds on trees that are, promises of spring, like all these like really beautiful things that you see in the winter that you can only see in the winter. And then if you are a person who's looking for a community, there's like all these different ways that you can like plug in and tap in. You can go to Havenwood State Forest. You can go to Urban Ecology Center. You could go to nearby nature events. There's all these people doing like free, cool stuff in the city, like pretty much every single week, that's supporting getting outside, getting active, being connected to community. So those are really good things. And then I think on like a very basic level, don't wear cotton close to your skin.
Right.
Let's hear that one more for that.
Right? You want to dress warm. You want to dress in layers. You don't want to have cotton be the nearest closest part to your skin because it traps moisture and moisture makes you feel cold. So like at a very basic level, like sometimes I talk to people about what they wear because they may think like, oh, I have to wear something like I got to go out and buy really expensive things. I have to have
just put on all 13 of your shirts and go outside. You know?
And that nearest shirt should be like your exercise layer. You're like, your base layer is important. So yeah, you don't have to have the coolest mountain climbing gear to get outside. You just have to dress warmly, and it makes a huge difference, right? Staying dry makes a big difference in how much you enjoy being outside.
That was Erin Whitney, Mia Knoll, and Jakai Ali talking about staying active and social during the winter months. This conversation is a part of our group chat series, which features local voices that aren't typically heard expressing their own opinions. It's produced by WUWM's Jimmy Gutierrez. We'll take one more break, and when we return, we'll tell you about some of the strangest museums you can visit in Wisconsin this winter. That's next on Lake Effect on 89.7 WUWM. This is Lake Effect on WUWM. I'm Audrey Nowakowski. If you're looking for some indoor entertainment this winter, Wisconsin is home to many unique places, including a wide variety of weird museums. T. Krulos wrote about them for Milwaukee Magazine and shared a few of them with Lake Effect's Joy Powers.
There are many odd museums in the state of Wisconsin. In fact, a number that could not be included on this list because, you only have so much space on the page, as it were.
Right.
But you have a great list of some interesting museums. I'm going to start with one that really caught my eye. It's also what the list starts with, the National Mustard Museum.
I know. It's a very odd place. I mean, all these places are great because they're so unique. And like you say, Wisconsin is very rich with them. So I had no trouble finding stuff to write about. But the Mustard Museum is just outside of Madison, and it has over 6,000 mustard bottles and related items. One of the best parts of it, though, is they have a gift shop that is also a tasting room. So you can sample over 100 different types of mustards. So if you love mustards, this is a must stop on your list.
I feel like mustard is one of those things that you go, well, how many kinds of mustard can there be? And then you look in your refrigerator and you go, I have 6 kinds of mustard in this refrigerator.
Yeah. And it's one of the few condiment museums in the country. The other one would be out, Heinz, has a pretty good museum. But so if you like ketchup and mustard, that might be your epic road trip there.
So the next one we're going to look at, this is about a history that I think some Wisconsinites are familiar with, and then others are surprised to learn about. This is the History Museum at the Castle, and it looks at Houdini.
I know, it's such a great story, and like you say, I don't think it's recognized enough. I mean, we have the bronze fonds, which is great, but Houdini was actually an amazing person who spent his formative years living in Appleton first. He lived there for about 4 years, and then they actually lived in Milwaukee for a while before they moved on to New York. So the History Museum at the Castle in Appleton has this great exhibit called AKA Houdini, in which you kind of journey through his life, and they have some really fun interactive displays where you can kind of try out some of his escape tricks and magic tricks. And it's just a really nice recognition of this famous resident of Appleton.
Yeah. Now, the next museum I think is going to be very interesting for polka lovers. And when I was thinking about like an accordion museum, this is an accordion museum, I wondered what that would look like. And then I went, oh, well, they're a complex instrument.
Yes. Yeah, not surprising that this would be in Wisconsin, way up in Superior, Wisconsin. They have this huge collection of over 2,500 accordions. And like you say, most people associate that with polka, and that's certainly a key part of that genre. But they have accordions from all over the world because they are used in different music styles. And the museum there is really great because it's in an old church. And so they have the museum display. They also have a venue where they, of course, have accordion-centric performances. And they have a repair shop and a really big archive of sheet music and other stuff related to accordions. So it's really an important cultural part of the state.
And that's called a world of accordions,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Well, and speaking of the world, the next museum we'll be looking at, I think some people, again, are going to know bits of this history. A lot of different towns have kind of a circus clown history here in Wisconsin. But this is the International Clown Hall of Fame and Research Center.
Yes. So this location, by the way, has moved around a little bit. I remember back in the day, it was in like the basement level of the Plankinton building, which is also where the WUWM studios were at the time. So you were neighbors with this at one point. And Baraboo has such a rich history of the circus. The Ringling Brothers were from Baraboo, and it became like a circus capital of the country for a while. A lot of circuses had their headquarters there. So it's a good spot for the International Clown Hall of Fame, where they have pictures of famous clowns as well as their rubber noses and giant shoes and costumes and props that they used. Like I noted in this article, might not be a great place for some people to go because some people do have a pretty intense fear of clowns. I don't. I mean, once in a while I find them kind of creepy, but I think I have a normal level of reaction to them.
I will say my arch nemesis is the probably still more famous Joy Powers, who is a clown.
Really?
Joy Powers the clown, yes.
Do you think that she is in the International Clown Hall of Fame?
Look, she might be. She was very well known. Anytime I would Google my name, Joy Powers the clown came up right away.
Oh, that's too funny.
So the final museum that we're going to talk about, this is the Bergstrom Mahler Museum of Glass. I've heard this is just a beautiful museum.
It is. It is very beautiful. I mean, there's so much glass in it, and then when the light comes through the right way, it's really quite dazzling. And it's home to the largest collection of glass paperweights in the world, which is over 6,000 pieces. So it's a lot of glass. I mean, it does make me, being a bigger guy, it makes me a little nervous in places like this because I'm afraid I'm going to break something. But yeah, very beautiful individual pieces of glasswork there.
Now, of course, like with any list, you couldn't include every museum, but what were some of your favorite museums that didn't make the cut?
Well, one I really wanted to include was the Freshwater Fishing Hall of Fame in Hayward, which is kind of famous because the museum is shaped like a giant muskie that you can walk into and see fishing artifacts. However, they're only open seasonally, so you can go visit there this summer. But, this being a winter issue, I wanted to include places that people could go out and visit right away. So that was one. And then Redner's Rescued Cat Figurine Museum. I know you've had them on the show before. I wrote about them last year, which is why I didn't include them. But they have a overwhelming collection of cat knickknacks. Again, I was a little nervous because there's so many fragile pieces. But, and the good thing about them is it's for a good cause. The money that they raise, they give to cat shelters and stuff like that. Oh, and then last one I think I'll mention, I was just in Lake Geneva. We talked a little bit about that before we went on the air, and I went to the Geneva Lake Museum, which is a cool little museum. I love that they have kind of their own take on like streets of old Milwaukee when you first walk in. And they've got a nice little display called The Wizard of Lake Geneva, which is about Dungeons and Dragons, which came from there and wasn't on my list, but it is now.
All right. Well, T, thank you so much for joining us here on Lake Effect.
Thanks for having me.
T. Krulos is a local writer whose article on Wisconsin's weird museums was featured in Milwaukee Magazine in 2024. That's when he spoke with Lake Effect's Joy Powers. And Weird Wisconsin Museums wraps up Lake Effect for today. I'm Audrey Nowakowski. If you've missed any of Lake Effect this week, you can find all of our conversations at WUWM.com. If you'd like to take the show on the go, you can download the Lake Effect podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Tomorrow on Lake Effect, we'll share some ways you can rethink New Year's resolutions. And we'll talk with a Christmas tree farmer to learn what his holiday business might tell us about the local economy. Thank you so much for joining us today, right here on listener-supported 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR.